said, we've been operating on the continent and in West Africa and also Nigeria for the last several years, over 20 years, 25 years and counting. So we've seen multiple cycles. And what that means is that, like, you learn to take advantage or make the most of the opportunities that come out of, reversals or crisis, as well as embrace the more obvious opportunities. And I think West Africa, and indeed I would argue the entire Africa, if not the world as a whole, is facing one of those moments, when you have to be contrarian in thought and be effective in action, which means that, like, the power of partnerships, working with people, to solve what may appear to be difficult problems, but usually hide very potent opportunities. Let me tell you a story. Most people think about, how well we invested in the likes of the digital mobile license like MTN back in the day. But it actually came out of a crisis. There was a crisis back in 1998 when we were starting. Nigeria then went through a transition, and ultimately that government decided to, privatize or bring in the private sector into telecoms infrastructure. And like they say, the rest is history. We think a lot of that is happening now again, where, there are opportunities, even the so-called financial engineering, never before has there been a need, a pressing need to think about solutions that are both, fundamental, but also financial, and we are finding ourselves, having to work with subject matter experts and to partner with other people. And I do think that we'll look back and say, wow, as demanding as this environment was, it created some of the best opportunities we've seen on the continent in the last several years. Question. Like I said, we've been investing for 25 years. One of the benefits of that is that you actually have what you might call critical mass data or sufficient data, as they would say in maybe statistics or something, where you can actually reach some reasonable conclusions about what works, what hasn't worked, and what sectors that you've had good success, and why, more importantly, why you were successful, and therefore how you can turn that into sort of a repeatable strategy, if you will. And that then ties into your point. A great example is the telecoms sector and the technology and the digital economy that has sort of come out of that. Because we've been investing in it through the different phases, really. We've gone through the basic infrastructure, to, sort of the data that came from the voice all the way to digital, and now we're seeing the need for more critical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, as well as the sectors that will benefit from, telecoms and from technology. And therefore, what we're finding is that, like, we've also crucially built experience from investing across those cycles. So we, because in private equity, really, you need the team, you need the opportunity, and you need the capital. And those three things, when they come together, that's the sweet spot. And I think you will find that, like, the number of such sweet spots we are seeing as this year, telecoms, technology, digital infrastructure being one. We have the team, we see the opportunities, and hopefully the capital is coming as well. So that's one. And the same thing with energy. I talked about energy, both in its more fundamental form and the energy transition that we talk about in terms of climate change, clean energy, and so on. We've invested very successfully with teams that understand. Question. Like I said, we've been investing for 25 years. One of the benefits of that is that you actually have what you might call critical mass data or sufficient data, as they would say in maybe statistics or something, where you can actually reach some reasonable conclusions about what works, what hasn't worked, and what sectors that you've had good success. The energy transition and the whole climate change and sustainability theme isn't going away. So it's a question of how you play, not whether you play. I mean, it's not an option. There is no option there. And then when it comes to Africa, and Nigeria, I would argue, is a leader when it comes to Africa, it's understanding that this is a transition. It's a journey. It's not either or. It's like going from A to B. The question is, what's the speed of that journey? What is the depth of that journey? And who are the players that are needed in that journey? And you covered all that in your question. You certainly need the public sector to provide the enabling environment. You certainly need the global players or the stakeholders really in the climate sector to understand that it's a transition. So if you look at, for instance, fossil fuel versus gas versus what you might call clean energy, they're all relevant. I mean, with the geopolitical tensions around the world, even the rest of the world is recalibrating. So I think the real point, the real issue is how do we make the most of this opportunity? And this is where we need to fund, innovation. We need to fund, because the challenge with Africa is that we really need to attract more capital, not just talk, but, somebody said they need to go from, coming with their notebooks to their checkbooks, so that we can actually get the investing going. The good news I see is that more and more players are really interested in Africa. We are involved in an energy initiative and fund, which we are working with a number of players on, and we want it to play a key role in this transition. And what we are finding is that, yes, we may need to invest in some of the transition energy sources like gas, but also we will invest in clean energy, which then comes to your last point, which is it bankable? I think ultimately it will be bankable, but remember, bankability, you have to take into account the whole things. So if there are carbon credits, maybe they count as part of bankability, because those credits, maybe when you add them up, the thing will come into positive terrain.